And we're my friendly hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be doing one of our conference previews today. We're taking a look at the American as it's been one of the more interesting conferences in all of college basketball, one that was affected quite a bit by realignment 2 seasons ago. So we've got to call upon the master of the American to be able to help us out in segment number 2 to decipher all these teams. That would be Mike O'Donnell. He does a tremendous job as a color analyst over at CBS Sports along with ESPN. We're going to be looking at all 13 of these teams. It's now 13 because SMU decided that they were going to be buying their way into the ACC. So we're going to look at all these teams, the nooks and crannies of it, take a look at all of the coaches that we've got within the conference as well. Here in segment number 1, we're going to be taking a look at styles of play and betting trends involving the American. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys my projector or finish for this fine conference. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNN_D1. Keep in mind, Larsium, maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And because I am doing a conference preview today, that means that the news and notes that we saw in college basketball on Tuesday, those are going to be polished up tomorrow. So have no fear there, but let's get down to business and let's take a look at a American conference that is really a melting pot of a lot of different conferences. You had pretty much like half of Conference USA come into the American last off season, and that has led to, once again, much like we were seeing in the old Conference USA, a lot of fast teams and a lot of slow teams, including 2 of the bottom 10 teams in terms of total possessions per game in all of college basketball, Charlotte and North Texas. These 2 teams have been slugs for a very long time. Out of 362 Division I teams, North Texas 356th in terms of total possessions per game last year, Charlotte 357th. Now, you did have a team in Memphis that they decided that they were going to crank it up, and for Memphis, that is very much their style. They were the fastest team in the conference. They were 26th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And then you've got some teams that they sort of don't necessarily have that one true identity. They're a little bit more of a chameleon. We are starting to see UAB form a little bit more of an up-tempo style. They were really that when they had in the full Jelly Walker 2 seasons ago. Last year, they were down to about 117th in terms of total possessions per game. So they showed that they were willing to blend a little bit more. UTSA, meet me for the Roadrunners. They actually were your top team in terms of possessions per game last season, but they did have a coaching change in the offseason, though. I would say don't count on them being overly slow this year as they bring in Austin Klotch. He was the main assistant over at Alabama, and when he was coaching over at Nichols, he always ran a pretty up-tempo style. Meanwhile, you've got a Michael Shrewsbury disciple in Temple's Adam Fisher that it was a very interesting season number 1 for him. After the team started out 8-17, they go 8-3 in their final 11 games, and we give our own to Lane Kiffin go Owls here as they were a mid-tempo team at about 157th. And I did lie on Memphis being that number 1 team in terms of total possessions per game because that moniker, that belonged to Tulane. Tulane, number 9 in the country in terms of total possessions per game. This team really cranked it up last season, so we got a lot of intrigue there. And then you've got a few other teams that they are going to be looking to dial it back a little bit more. South Florida was a team that was more in the middle. Year number 1 under Amir Abdul-Rahim, a rousing success for them. They were about 161st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you've got a few other teams that they are going to be looking to be a little bit more of defensive stalwarts for this upcoming season. I think that's going to be interesting to see what Tulsa does as their tempo under Eric Conkle has been all over the place. They were number 38 in the country in terms of total possessions per game a season ago. Rice, they are now going to be taken over by Rob Lanier, that when he was over at SMU, Southern Methodist, a season ago, they were a mid-tempo team, 168th in all of college basketball, and Rice actually really dialed it back last season. They typically are one of your more up-tempo teams in all of college basketball. They were more around 216th in the country in terms of total possessions per game a season ago, so they're a team that is very much watching out for. And then when it comes to a team like Wichita State, I thought that they were going to be going a little bit more up-tempo last season. Instead, they decided that they were going to be dialing it back. They, in terms of total possessions per game, more around about 114th in the country under Paul Mills. So you've got a lot of intriguing teams. 2 of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. East Carolina, forgot to give them a little bit of love, 317th in the country in terms of their total possessions per game under Michael Schwartz. So they really dialed it back as well. And then you can tell that the offensive production Well, it was very touch and go with a lot of these teams, to say the least. Temple was very much held back by the fact that they were attempting a lot of threes, but they weren't necessarily making a lot of threes last season. As a result, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, during 55th in all of college basketball. For Tulane, they were able to do a solid job being able to put the ball in the basket, top 100 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but as we know, it's not just all about playing fast, it's about being efficient. At Memphis, while they were 63rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, that defense took a big step back, and the teams that just weren't able to shoot it from three-point range were the teams that really had a tough go of it last season. Like North Texas, once again, was towards the top of the conference. They weren't able to win the conference last season, but they were able to get to the NIT. They were able to have quite a bit of success with that regard. And for North Texas, even though they're one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, they were 14th in the country in terms of overall three-point shooting percentage. That led the way in terms of this conference. For Memphis, they had their ups and downs in terms of their three-point shooting. With Penny Hardaway, nothing is ever quite consistent with them. About 121st in the country in three-point shooting percentage, strangely shooting 32.3% from three at home and 37.4% from three on the road. Not sure how that necessarily works, but that's exactly what we got out of them last season. For Tulane, they were a team that they chucked the ball into the basket quite a bit. 85th in the country with that regard. Tulsa, a team that was a little bit more towards the bottom of the conference last season, though certainly it was much better than what they got in season number one. They were a team that was ranking more around about 265th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting. And Florida Atlantic, they weren't able to quite duplicate what they did 2 seasons ago, being able to make the Final Four, but you tell that this was still one of the more rock-solid offenses in all of college basketball. They were more around about 120th in the country in three-point shooting percentage. They were actually much more efficient in terms of just not turning the ball over and being able to get some twos on the board as well, being able to go to Vladislav Golden. So thought that was a little bit fascinating to dive in on as well. And then Rice, we give our ode to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. They were towards the bottom of the conference last season. That's a big reason why they made the coaching change. Just 208th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage as well. And when it comes to betting trends, when you got teams that are just all over the place, some of these teams that are some of the fastest in all of college basketball, some of the teams that are the slowest, that causes for a lot of volatility with regards to the total. UTSA, top 25 team in terms of total possessions per game last year, 20 overs to 11 unders. They were leading the way, and you can tell that a lot of the more up-tempo teams, they were the teams that were playing quite a few more overs. Tulane, 18 overs, 11 unders, and a push. Memphis, 18 overs, 13 unders, and a push. Yeah, North Texas, surprisingly, 18 overs and 14 unders. That wasn't because of their tempo, but it's because, as I was alluding to before, 14th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, these teams that underwent a little bit more of a fundamental change, they really had the defense running through their DNA. They were the teams that were able to go under. SMU with Rod Lanier at the helm, 18 unders and 14 overs. Charlotte, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, 16 unders, 13 overs, and a push. East Carolina, 19 unders to 13 overs. And then South Florida was leading the way in terms of the unders, 20 unders to 13 overs. I thought it was interesting what we saw when things got into conference play, because in conference play is when you really saw the overs start to take hold, but you had a lot of even-Steven teams. You only had 2 teams play more than 55.5% of their games to the under. Wichita State at 13 unders to 8 overs, and East Carolina 13 unders to 7 overs. Meanwhile, you only saw one team play more than 55.5% of their games to the over at UTSA, 12 overs to 7 unders. So this was very much a situation-by-situation conference, and I think that a lot of that has to do with just the fact that you do have so many different styles in the conference, and I am a big believer in every game being its own living, breathing entity, and the American very much bared that out with the way that the total splits went for a lot of these teams. But if you take a look at the against the spread record, well, the good news is for Tulsa, they weren't dead last in the country in terms of cover rate after they were absolutely awful against the spread during the 2022-23 season. And if you're wondering how awful, they were 424-2 against the spread. That is the worst against the spread record that we have seen this millennium for any team that partook in at least 10 games that made it on the Las Vegas betting board. They were a respectable 14-14-2 against the spread. Not amazing, not terrible, so that's something that you're willing to take, but you had 2 dominators in this conference. UAB went 21-12-1 against the spread, and in South Florida, 21-9-3 against the spread. And if you're wondering how that compares to the rest of all of college basketball, for South Florida, that was a top 5 cover rate in all of college college basketball. Pittsburgh also went 21-9-3 against the spread, and then you had UT Arlington at 23-9 against the spread, Minnesota at 25-9 against the spread, Stony Brook 25-8-1 against the spread. These were the only teams that had a higher cover rate than them. You did have your worst team in the conference be Memphis at 12-20 against the spread. Again, Penny Hardaway doing less with more, and we've seen that quite a bit out of Memphis, where they haven't necessarily been making a lot of money. A team that's been a little bit overhyped, but you did notice quite a few teams in this conference with having a lot of coaching changes that have happened over the last 2 years. They had some adjustment periods that led to a few of these teams being less than savory against the spread. East Carolina and SMU both went 14-17-1 against the spread last season. Rice 13-18-1 against the spread. Wichita State 13-19-1 against the spread. Tulane, after a nice start to the season, they fell off at 12-18 against the spread. While Temple went 17-16-2 against the spread. The team that was involved in the gambling scandal, go figure there. But if you look at how things went in non-conference play, that was a little bit of an issue for the American, as you had UTSA and Wichita State both go 4-8 against the spread in non-conference play. Tulane was 4-7 with this. East Carolina 5-7 against the spread in non-conference play, and you really had only one team be able to emerge. That was Florida Atlantic at 9-5 against the spread, and then they got a little bit overvalued when it came to actual conference play. And this is a pretty spread out conference. You've got teams out there in the great state of Pennsylvania. You've obviously got teams in Alabama, Florida. This is very much a wide-ranging conference extending all the way out to Wichita, Kansas, and home court advantage in this conference, it was quite meaningful for a lot of these teams. South Florida, 13-4-1 against the spread at home. Tulsa, 12-4-1 against the spread at home. Charlotte, 10-4 against the spread at home. You did have two teams that just weren't so great against the spread at home. Memphis, just because they got, once again, so badly overvalued, they were 5-10 against the spread at home. East Carolina, 7-11-1 against the spread at home. But most of these teams were able to do a pretty rock-solid job at home. You only had two other teams finish with a against the spread record that was more than a game below 500 at home. SMU and Rice both went 6-9-1 against the spread at home, while UAB, UTSA, they both were either 8-7 or 8-7-1 against the spread at home, and North Texas 8-5 against the spread at home. And then when it came to hitting the road for these teams, you had two teams that really emerged. North Texas was 8-4 against the spread on the road. Temple was 7-3-2 against the spread on the road. But you notice a lot of these teams struggle. Tulane went 4-6 against the spread on the road. Memphis 5-8 against the spread on the road. Wichita State 3-7-1 against the spread on the road. With Florida Atlantic just a straight up 3-7 against the spread on the road. Tulsa 2-8-1 against the spread on the road, and Charlotte 3-9 against the spread on the road. And very intriguing to take a look at this conference and the way that favorites, they just got absolutely gobbled up. This was very much an underdog conference last year, with Temple going just 3-8 against the spread as a favorite. Memphis, once again, overvalued team, 7-15 against the spread as a favorite. Florida Atlantic, 14-18 against the spread as a favorite, though you did have a trio of teams that really embraced being a favorite. Tulsa was 8-2-1 against the spread as a favorite. North Texas, 12-6 against the spread as a favorite. And South Florida, they went 12-7-2 against the spread as a favorite, but this was very much a dog conference, with UAB going 12-2 against the spread as an underdog. UTSA was 12-9 against the spread as a dog. Temple, go Owls, 14-8-2 against the spread as an underdog. Meanwhile, there were four teams that they did not come through as an underdog. Tulane, 4-10 against the spread as an underdog. Wichita State, 5-11-1 against the spread as a dog. Tulsa, 6-12-1 against the spread as an underdog. And Rice, 7-12-1 against the spread as an underdog. So if you've gathered anything, this is a very, very herky-jerky, out there, all sorts of interest conference, a lot of different styles. That means that you want to be taking this conference game to game. This is not one where you want to be just banking on a whole bunch of trends or anything like that, unless if you just kept taking South Florida time and time again on the spread. That was able to work out very well for you last season, but this is very much a intriguing conference, and I think that we're going to be seeing much more of that moving forward, and a man that is going to help us be able to decipher this conference even further. He is such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to college basketball. That'd be Mike O'Donnell. He does great work over at ESPN and CBS Sports, and he joins me next on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family Podcast, the American Conference Preview Edition. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man as Mike O'Donnell. He does an absolutely tremendous job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. You've heard him doing color commentary work for so many different years over at ESPN CBS Sports. Does an amazing job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Seen him once or twice on the field of 68 as well. If there's someone talking about college basketball. He's probably doing a great job breaking it down with them. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at MOD, the number 4, and then the word 3 all together, and his video breakdowns on his Twitter/X feed. Very good as well. Mike, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Greg. That might be the greatest intro I've ever received in my life. Thank you, my friend. That was incredible.
Always happy to. We always have to roll out the red carpet for some of our best guests, and you're certainly one of them, Mike. And Mike, when it comes to the American, it certainly is a little bit different looking than it was 24 or so months ago, and a team that is going to be very different looking this year as well. That'd be UTSA. This is a team that, truth be told, I am very bullish on. Love the hire of Austin Klonch, a guy that I thought did a very good job over at Nichols a few seasons ago, and he brings in quite a bit of talent. Headlined, in my opinion, by Damari Monsanto, who we saw him 2 years ago be a starter and a rock-solid one at that over at Wake Forest. Lots of moving parts, really nobody that returns from last year, but having guys like Teron Joseph, Primo Spears that know how to put the ball in the basket, I feel bullish for UTSA, even though it is going to be a different look than in past years.
Yeah, no question. I mean, in the last 3 seasons, 11 wins, 10 wins, 10 wins. I think the lineup that Coach Klonch has is enough to kind of get over that marker of 11, maybe a 15-win season is certainly a possibility. He was 5 years head coach at Nichols, like you said. I mean, he had 2 20-win seasons, 2 Southland Conference regular season titles, and then just spent the year under Nate Oates at Alabama. You mentioned a couple of those guys. Monsanto is good. 6'6" transfer from Wake. 2 years ago, he's averaging 13 a game, shot over 40% from 3. Ended up having a knee injury that season ended early and was never really quite the same. But the Roadrunners do have pretty good depth. Klonch's teams usually play fast with a focus on defensive pressure. Kind of curious to see if there will be any of Alabama's offensive DNA that we saw under Nate Oates. There's some guys there that know how to score. Teron Joseph, 6'3" senior at a stop at Austin Peay and Radford. Spent the last season at Southern, where he averaged 20 points a game. And you got Marcus Millender, 5'4" sophomore, 9 points a game, 3 assists per game, shot over 40% from 3. Goes by Smurf, by the way, just a tremendous college basketball nickname. You mentioned Primo Spears. Greg, Primo's good. Kind of last year, he didn't get off to the right track because there were some eligibility questions. Wasn't inserted into the lineup after multiple games in the season. Never really found a rhythm. But very fast, very crafty, double-digit scoring guard that can absolutely push the pace on both ends of the floor. UTSA will not be an easy 10-win maximum on the season, like one of those easy wins. They got a couple dudes on that team that they should be much improved.
Yep, we saw a few flashes from UTSA last year, and I think bringing in Austin Klonch is certainly going to be able to help out that program. And I really like what has happened with this program over the last few years. Certainly, East Carolina has not been like some sort of a top 25 team or anything like that, but you saw some flashes of this team coming into their own last year. They were able to have a really nice game against Florida last year. They do have to replace some of those key pieces from a season ago. No longer having Brandon Johnson is going to hurt, but RJ Felton is a guy that's able to stuff the stat sheet. Love what he's able to bring to the table for this team. I feel like they don't necessarily bring in the splashiest transfers, but they bring in a lot of transfers that just fit the system, like a Jordan Riley, who has some experience within the conference as well. And I look at East Carolina, and even though they don't have a lot of sizzle outside of RJ Felton, I think that the supporting pieces are going to be able to help them out. I think that Julian Sawarmo coming in is a little bit of an under-the-radar guy as well.
Yeah, they were 15 and 18 last season. This is year 3 for Michael Schwartz, and ECU hasn't been over 500 since 2012. I think this is the year that worst case scenario, they're 500. I do think they'll be better than 500 this year. As you alluded to, a couple pieces back, you mentioned RJ Felton. RJ Felton is good. I mean, that dude can hoop. 17 a game, his third team All-American Conference. He's one of the best rebounding guards in the country, not just the conference, but in the country. At 6'3", he grabbed over 6 rebounds a game, and he was the heart and soul of the team last season. There's 8 new players. You mentioned you lose Brandon Johnson to Miami. They also lost Ezra Osser to Utah. But there's a couple guys that I think are really good fits. I mean, you've got kind of an interconference transfer in Jordan Riley, who's coming over from Temple, 6'4" senior, about 12 points a game, 6 rebounds a game. He's an excellent wing player, will fit that defensive-minded Michael Schwartz system. Dante Felton is RJ Felton's brother, 6'2" freshman. He was the number 1 point guard in South Carolina as a senior this past season. A lot of talent. So a full Felton backcourt is what you're going to get from East Carolina. CJ Walker, transfer from UCF. CJ Walker is going to be one of the best athletes, probably maybe top 5 athlete in the American Conference. Terrific shot blocker, can stretch the floor. He's not an elite three-point shooter, but he can stretch the floor enough. You need to add some shooting, and I think they try to do that with Jan Farrell, transfer from St. Bonaventure. 2 years ago, he was the Atlantic Sentinel rookie team, can really shoot it. So this is, I think, the year that East Carolina, I'm not saying they're going to make a huge jump, but I think they'll be over 500.
Yep, I think that that's a very reasonable expectation, and I'm sort of in that boat as well. I like what Mike Schwartz is building over there. As Mike O'Donnell, he does a tremendous job breaking down this game of college basketball over at CBS Sports, ESPN, and so much more. Joining me on the American Conference Preview edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, and I absolutely love this team because they've got a set identity. North Texas, they're going to play slow. They're going to play in your grill defense. They are going to be losing a few pieces from a season ago, but I think that Rondale Walker can take a nice stride forward in a bigger role this year. And then they bring in someone in Aiden Wright who is able to be just a bucket getter over at CSUN. And Jasper Floyd, for those that didn't pay attention to him over at Fairfield, the guy is a gadget. He is able to do a little bit of everything. And I look at the way that North Texas has retooled this roster, being able to bring back guys like Mule Sissoko, who don't score a lot, but they just do a great job on the glass. I think that North Texas, once again, going to be a tough customer out there in the American.
Always going to be a tough customer. North Texas, they won 19 games last season. They lost in the second round of the NIT. In Ross Hodges' first year taking over the reins at North Texas. 4 straight seasons of finishing in the top 75 of the Ken Pom. Greg, there have been only 7 teams in the last 4 years who have at least one NCAA tournament win or one NIT win. Baylor, Creighton, Gonzaga, Houston, Kansas, Oregon, North Texas. Winning is the expectation in Denton, Texas. And it's going to be an uphill battle this season. They lost their top 6 scorers from last season, but brought in a ton of additions in the portal. You mentioned Jasper Floyd. I think, that kind of Swiss Army knife guard, bigger, stronger guard, 6 rebounds a game at a 6'3" out of Fairfield is very impressive. I really like the addition of Brennan Lawrence, 6'8", kind of hybrid 4 from Florida Atlantic. He'll come in and that'll be a plug and play guy. Definitely a player to keep your eye on is Latrell Giselle, transfer from Stephen F. Austin, 6'1", crazy tough as nails defender. Fits the defensive minded culture of North Texas perfectly. And to go on top of that, he averaged about 13 a game. He's scored over 1,000 points in his career, and he shot over 38% from 3. The backcourt, like next to Latrell Giselle, is going to be Anton Wright. He transferred from Drake. He was Drake's second leading scorer last season. I mean, Greg, you know how good of a team Drake was. 6'1", 14 a game, another 1,000-point scorer. So there's talent in the backcourt. And there are some pieces in the front court that North Texas is going to be one of those teams that may start slow, but you don't really have a choice at North Texas. I mean, winning is the expectation. They're going to get incrementally better. They're going to defend. And they're going to rebound and they're going to be physical. Can they manufacture points? Don't expect them to play fast. They're not going to. That's who they are. But a big piece of the North Texas success, if you look at the last couple of years, especially the years with Tyler Perry, their defense was always in the top 20 in the country, but they also had good three-point shooting. You could play slow, but also play efficient. The efficiency of their offense is really going to determine whether or not North Texas gets over that 19-win mark that they got this past season.
And you mentioned Giselle. I think that that's going to be a big part of that offense as well. And for Temple, the offense started out slow last year, but you could tell that Adam Fisher style, it was able to take hold as after that strange gambling scandal that we saw in the UAB game, all of a sudden Temple was able to go on a really nice run. And they bring back a few pieces like Matteo Piccarelli along with Steve Settle from last year, but bringing in Lynn Greer, a point guard from the Atlantic 10, Jamal Mashburn Jr., double-figure scorer from New Mexico, along with those ancillary pieces from a season ago. I look at this Temple team, and I feel like there's no reason why this team should not be leaps and bounds better than they were a season ago.
And, leaps and bounds, it's going to depend on the backcourt of what you just said, right? Lynn Greer, the second, transfer from St. Joseph's, just an excellent guard. He really is. 10 points per game, almost 4 assists per game, understands how to manipulate the offense, high basketball IQ. Jamal Mashburn Jr., he took a big step back offensively because he dealt with a bunch of nagging injuries, and we all know how good that New Mexico team last season in the Mountain West. I mean, he's one of the most feared mid-range and ISO scorers in the Mountain West, and arguably in the country. I mean, in ISO, he's very difficult to stop. He was third team All Mountain West last season. that backcourt between Greer and Mashburn Jr., that's the whole key. You know that Adam Fisher's going to want to take a lot of threes coming from Penn State under the tutelage of Michael Shrewsbury. Temple shot a lot of threes last season. They just didn't have a bunch of guys that could make shots. They went 16-20, finished 10th in the American, had a 10-game losing streak, but they made it all the way to the American Conference Tournament Finals. It was a very eventful year one for Adam Fisher. We talk about the guards too, but the front court, they got a 7'1" Tulsa transfer, Mohamed Keita. Temple lacked front court size big time last season. It was a real problem for them in a handful of games. And he's a rim protector and a lob threat that could kind of change that for Coach Fisher. I don't think that Temple will compete for an American title, but they're going to win more than 5 conference games. That's the number they won last season, 5 conference games. They'll win more than 5. The backcourt's going to be good. Front court has to rebound and has to provide some type of rim protection. That was a big Achilles heel for Temple last season.
Yep, it certainly was, and we saw them be able to play so much better in the back half of the season, and I think that this is going to be able to improve the Owls as well. Bringing in Rob Lanier, who I thought did a solid job at SMU. When you have a changing conference like SMU does, when you're able to bring in somebody like an Andy Enfield, you have to take advantage. But I aim for one team having to move to a different conference. That's the other team's fortunes for Rice, in my opinion, as he did a great job there. Brings with him Jalen Smith, who I think is going to be able to make some nice inroads in this backcourt. Troy Bordenot, I think, is the X factor for this team, coming over from USC Upstate, and certainly this team is going to have a few question marks down low. But I look at Rice, and even though I don't think that they're going to be a competitor in the American, I look at them just being able to make improvement, and I think that this is going to be a well-coached team that gets better as the season goes along.
Yeah, Rob Lanier can coach. I think everybody was surprised when SMU moved on from him after a 20-win season and going to the NIT. I just think that Coach Lanier understands how to take over programs quickly and add in a culture. We had a chance to get to know him, and his players love him. He knows how to win games. And he wants to play a lot like how the Billy Donovan Florida Gators teams played, where there's a major commitment on the defensive end, providing a lot of freedom and opportunity on the offensive end. Rice underperformed last season. That's why they moved on from Scott Para. They had big expectations. They went 11-21. And they ended up losing 8 of their last 10 games in American Conference play. I mean, the goal for Rob Lanier is really to bring in kind of a up-tempo and entertaining style of play for Rice fans. And that's kind of traditionally how Rob Lanier's teams play. They had 8 transfers this offseason. You mentioned a few of them. I think it's important to pay attention to Kellen Amos, 6'7" grad transfer, averaged about 12 points a game, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. Great kind of trail mix type game. It was at Central Connecticut State, and he was all Northeast Conference second team. You mentioned Trey, and he was a 6'4" grad transfer from UC Upstate. He was all Big South. But then also got 3 guards that followed Lanier from SMU to Rice: Denver Anglin, Jalen Smith, and Emory Lanier, who was Coach Lanier's son. And so you're bringing those 3 guards, who all 3 of those guards played significant minutes last season for SMU and understand the system, understand the culture. That's a big leg up. Rice is going to have some struggles this season just because you're almost starting from scratch. It's a terrific hire. You're going to set the foundation for the culture. And Rice they're not going to be middle of the pack, but I don't think it's going to be an easy out from the Rice Owls this season.
Neither do I. As joining me on the show, we've got Mike O'Donnell, does a great job as a color analyst for so many college basketball broadcasts all throughout the year, joining me on Cuss Hoops. And how about if we take a look at Tulsa, one that will be in a little bit of transition. And even though they do get bad news with PJ Haggerty staying within the conference and going to Memphis, getting back Heston Willis, I think, is absolutely massive. Guy that was limited to 2 games. He knows very well what to expect out of Eric Conkle as he followed him over from Louisiana Tech. And I think it is going to be interesting what we get out of this bunch, because Conkle is a guy that I absolutely love as a coach. And Braden Carrington coming over from Minnesota, I think is big. They retained Jared Garcia, who I think is going to be able to do a rock solid job down low. I think the question is, some of these guys like a Tyshawn Archie, Justin Amati, what are they going to be able to add to really elevate a team that I would say doesn't have as much of a star as they did in Haggerty last year, but overall might be a little bit more well-rounded?
I think that was well said. I think Tulsa's going to fight for middle of the pack in the American this season. I'm a big believer in Eric Conkle as a coach. What he did at Louisiana Tech, he was essentially winning basically 25 games a year at Louisiana Tech and regularly winning the regular season in Conference USA. Year 1 at Tulsa, Boy, Greg, how bad was that? That was bad, man. 5 total wins. Total. Not just in the conference, but on the season. And they jumped up to 16 wins last season. A lot of it had to do with PJ Haggerty, like you said, who was freshman of the year in the nation, nationally, not just in the American Conference. And so you lose him, it's a big chunk. You're trying to replace 21 points a game. But they returned 6 key players. You mentioned Keaston Willis, broke his foot 2 games into the season, Louisiana Tech transfer. Excellent offensive skill set, shoots over 50% from 3, and he's scored over 1,600 career points. If he's healthy, he's one of the best scoring guards in the conference. And you mentioned Braden Carrington, versatile wing, transfer to Minnesota. He was former Mr. Basketball of Minnesota. Carrington's good. That's a great addition for Tulsa. And Dwan Odom, 6'2" grad transfer, point guard from Georgia State. I like his game. Played 2 years at Xavier as well. About 12 points a game, almost 5 assists a game, scored over 1,000 career points. That Odom-Willis backcourt is a sneaky good backcourt. And I think if they defend like Conkle wants them to, there's going to be, everybody's going to assume that there won't be offensive firepower. But with Odom and Willis, there can be. Tulsa is moving in the right direction. Willis needs to be great, and they should continue to get better defensively under Conkle's tutelage. I mean, 18 wins is certainly within their ability. I don't know if they'll get there, but it absolutely is possible for Tulsa this season.
And I think that this team might have a little bit of a difficult time duplicating what they did last season, but I love Amir Abdul-Rahim as a coach. He's got Brandon Stroud, who's one of those guys that followed him from Kennesaw State. And they've added some nice pieces down low. Jamile Reynolds coming over after spent a little bit of time at Cincinnati, was in the conference a few seasons ago over at Central Florida. He should be able to do a nice job down low. Gasson Jennings is someone that began his career over at Kennesaw State as well. And I thought that was so big for Amir Abdul-Rahim, having so many guys from his old stomping grounds at Kennesaw State that knew the system, be able to lay the foundation. Now you've got a few guys that maybe didn't begin their careers playing for Abdul-Rahim and Kobe Knox, Jaden Reed, but I think that these guys are going to be rock solid, helping out in the backcourt. And for South Florida, you could tell that defense was just so strong. They were able to find their identity late in the season. I see no reason why South Florida shouldn't be successful once again. Maybe a little bit of a drop off in terms of win total, but I could see this being one of those classic teams that maybe wins a game or two fewer than a season ago, but they actually play a little bit of better basketball, just given the way that the schedule was last year.
Yeah, I think your description of rock solid this season is spot on. They went 25-8. Obviously, they were the talk of college basketball for a couple weeks there. In my opinion, Amir Abdur-Rahim was robbed of National Coach of the Year and went 16-2 in American Conference play. They had a win streak of 15, which is absurd in college basketball, and they advanced to the second round of the NIT. But they lose their top 3 players to the portal. Chris Youngblood, Celta Miguel, Casey and Pryor, all gone. But Kobe Knox is back, who started every game last season, and point guard Jaden Reed, who saw some starters minutes as well. He was an American Conference All-Freshman team selection, shot over 47% from 3. I like Jaden Reed lots. I know that Coach Abdur-Rahim has told me he likes Jaden Reed a lot. You mentioned Brandon Stroud back as well. A couple new faces. You mentioned a few of them. But Jimmy Williams is a guy that I think nobody's going to talk about early on, but he's a JUCO All-American, averaged over 22 points a game and shot over 37% from 3. They got Deontay Green, transfer from Florida State, 6'9", rangy athletic wing. He'd probably be a starter. And you mentioned Jamil Reynolds. Nobody's been quite able to unlock the Jamil Reynolds potential. And he's 6'11", transfer from Cincinnati, also UCF and Temple. He has all the post tools to be an all-conference player. I think if I'm going to hot take about South Florida, I believe that Abdur-Rahim is the coach that could get him to be an all-conference player. Huge amount of success in year one. Huge. And I called games in South Florida. That place was rocking, and the Yuengling Center is never rocking. And that place was wild last season. Can they replicate it? Replicate a 25-win season? I don't know. Just like you said, I don't know. But a 20-win season is absolutely in play. There's still a lot of talent and a good chunk of returning players. Rock solid 20-win season is more than a possibility for South Florida.
I'm in agreement with you there. And when it comes to this bunch, I think the biggest question mark is going to be depth because for Tulane, they lose quite a bit in the portal as well. Rowan Brumbaugh, who is a former top 100 recruit, played over at Georgetown last year. He and Michael Ealy, who was one of the top scorers over at Siena last year, are going to need to come in, hold down the fort. I think that Kyle Green as a freshman is one of the more underrated freshmen in all of college basketball. And certainly Asher Woods is going to need to step up. Need to get your thoughts here on this Tulane team because I love Ron Hunter as a coach. I think that this is going to be
Yeah.
one of his most difficult coaching jobs just because I think the big question with this team is if they lose someone due to injury, where do they go from there?
There you go. I think you hit it. Tulane was 14-17 last season. They started the season 10-3. They only had 5 American Conference wins, and they had a 7-game losing streak to end the season. And everybody was just shocked because the starting 5, so much talent, but they lacked a ton of depth. Tulane should be better than their record showed last season. They're deeper and they're bigger in terms of the lineup this season. 0 starters return. You're just kind of flipping the page. It's an entirely new team. You know that Ron Hunter loves his offense. They average 82 points a game, and all 5 starters average double figures, but all those 5 starters are gone. 9 new faces. You mentioned Rowan Brumbaugh, 6'4" sophomore, true point guard, something they didn't really have last season. A true point guard, did shoot over 37% from 3 at Georgetown. You mentioned the freshman, KJ Green, 6'3", Georgia's Class 4A Player of the Year. He will compete for all freshman honors in the American Conference this season. I think he's that good. Redshirt freshman from Georgia this past season, Maury Jordan. Coach Hunter says he is the key to just placing him in the lineup on both ends of the floor of kind of the guy that can really stir the drink. Michael Eli, 6'4" junior wing, Metro Atlantic Rookie of the Year at Siena. Young, talented wing, 13 points a game, 5 rebounds a game. And then you look at, there's just bigger size on the wings. Got the versatile forward in Caleb Banks, transfer from Indiana, 6'8". So they are bigger on paper. They are deeper on paper. Do I think the starting 5 is going to be as talented as the starting 5 last year for Tulane? No. I think this lineup may be better defensively, and that might just be what Tulane needs to kind of restart everything. Coach Hunter went all in on NIL, pursuing players this season we didn't last season, and we'll see if it pays dividends, but it's just hard to count out Coach Hunter. That last season almost feels like a blip on the radar. We've got to assume that they're going to be at least 3 or 4 games better.
Yep, with Tulane, they are just so well coached. The question is that depth going to really be an issue during the season? And with this team, talent is not the question. Memphis, if you look at them, they have the most talented roster, in my opinion, in the American. You bring in PJ Haggerty, you bring in Tyrese Hunter, Dane Danger, Nick Jourdain is back. You just go down the list. Musa Cisse returns, and Memphis should be a top 25 team, but they can force staff members like 2 weeks before we do this podcast. It just feels like Penny Hardaway. I hate to say it, but he's done a little bit less with more over the last few years, and that's the biggest trepidation I have with Memphis because this team should be able to go through and just rip through the American, but I just fear that something goes wrong with this team because it feels like it's happened every year at Memphis.
Penny's won at least 20 games every single year at Memphis. From a Memphis fan base perspective, that's not good enough. That's what the fan base will tell you, is that's just not good enough. Finished 76 in KenPom last season. Previous 4 seasons, they finished inside the top 60. And I think Penny really wanted to find, we're just talking specifically this lineup, he wanted to find more toughness, more physicality when he's building out this roster. And you lose 4 starters, and a lot of that has to do with they gave up 75 points per game and had a negative rebounding margin and turned it over 13 times a game. So you have this talent, but I think they were missing toughness from a rebounding standpoint and on the defensive end. And they were missing efficiency on the offensive end. And they still went 22-10. You just mentioned, I'm just going to roll through them quick here. The talent is there. Tyrese Hunter, transfer from Texas. 6-foot point guard, can be electric at times. He's a senior grad transfer, 10 points a game, 3 assists per game. Going to play next to him, PJ Haggerty, Tulsa, led all scoring, a lot of freshmen in scoring in the country, 13-time American Conference Freshman of the Week, league record for most wins for freshman of the week. 3rd in the nation in fouls drawn per game. He's tough. He's physical. Colby Rogers, shooter from Wichita State, 39% from 3, but physical. PJ Carter, transfer from UTSA, physical. Musa Cisse, big fella, 7-footer, Ole Miss transfer, physical rim protector. Started his career at Memphis, kind of boomeranged his career. Tyreek Smith, transfer from SMU, 6'8", 225 tank, another physical player. And then you also mentioned Dane Danger, 6'9", transfer from Illinois, started all 38 games last season for Illinois. Penny said that he has the best feet that he's seen since Drew Timme. There's size, there's physicality, there's talent. If it's put all together, there is absolutely no reason why Memphis shouldn't win 25 games this season. There isn't too much talent to not hit that 25 win marker. But there just is uncertainty. You mentioned the coaching changes at this time of the season, virtually unheard of. And with all these new faces, after losing 4 starters, there's a lot to learn about the Memphis Tigers. We just don't know. I'm not trying to give you some fake answer, Greg. We just don't know what Memphis is going to be like this season.
Yep, right there with you, because I think that this is by far the most talented roster in the conference, but at the same time, what are we going to be able to get out of them this season? Because it always feels like there's some sort of a roadblock that holds them back. And for Charlotte, this team, even though they went through a coaching change the last few seasons, they just continue to be that solid 18 to 21 team, but they are going to have to replace their top 3 scorers from last season. And Igor Milicic being out, I think hurts, but Robert Braswell, Nick Graves, these are a pair of guys I think have some good versatility, with Graves having a little bit of size and is able to facilitate. Charlotte, not one for necessarily hitting the transfer portal and bringing in a whole bunch of guys, but I like the fact that they've got Kylan Blackman in as well, and then Nika, who comes over from the Sun Belt. I'm not going to try to pronounce the 15 plus letter last name, but he should be rock solid as well. And want to get your thoughts on a Charlotte team that they're almost like a light version of North Texas in the way that they play slowly, but they just execute their game.
Yes, but the offense, there are similarities on paper between Charlotte and North Texas, but the offense is much different. I'm a big believer in head coach Aaron Fern. He almost won American Conference Coach of the Year. They went 19-12. They were picked 13th and finished 3rd in the American Conference and completely ignited that Charlotte fan base. You mentioned they lost Lakai Patterson to Minnesota. He was their bulldog of a scoring point guard. Igor Milicic, one of the smartest players in the country, transferred to Tennessee. Deshaun Jackson, the tank down low, transferred to Iowa State. But they got some guys that stayed. Nick Graves, he was the 4th leading scorer of the team last season, 6'3" junior guard, probably ready for that bigger role. Robert Braswell, 7th year of college basketball for Braswell, can be the X factor for Charlotte this season. 6 transfers coming in for the 49ers. You mentioned Nika, and here's how it is. Are you ready for this, Greg?
Yes.
Mitsarishvili, a transfer from Louisiana Monroe, 6'8". He led Louisiana Monroe in scoring and rebounding. He is good. Not like, okay, he can play. I also really like the addition of Giancarlo Rosado from Florida Atlantic. Perfect fit, elite IQ, 6'8", will be one of the best passers in the American Conference, regardless of position. Coach Fern is going to use him a lot on it as that point center position. Kylan Blackman, 6'3" from Coastal Carolina, averaged over 11 points a game. Physical, tough, smart guard. And Jeremiah Oden, 6'9" from DePaul. Great athlete, excellent rebounder. He'll play really well in the American Conference. Charlotte will not sneak up on anybody this season. Coach Fern can coach. They lost some firepower, no question. But Charlotte will be one of those teams that will win 19 games again this season. But it's going to come, a lot of those wins, I think, will come over the course of time. I don't think they're going to shoot out of a cannon. It's going to take 12 games for them to figure it out. But Charlotte is exceptionally well coached. There is talent. There's also size, and there's still some culture pieces in there. They're going to compete for that, middle of the pack, 7, 8, 9 marker this season in conference play.
Yep, I think that they're going to be very competitive, and I think that they are set up for a big year. And the question becomes, with this team, are they going to be able to take some strides forward in year number 2 under their new regime? As Wichita State under Paul Mills had a bit of a rough year last year, but they return a lot of those key pieces. I like Harlan Beverly, a 6'5", do-it-all sort of player. Justin Hill, I think, is really going to be able to elevate this team in the backcourt as well. And Zane Meeks is a guy that goes under the radar that I remember when he was at Nevada, when he was at Arizona State, a guy that's able to pump it in there from 3 at 6'9", has great versatility. versatility. And then Corey Washington is one of my favorite, more under the radar transfers in all of college basketball in the Metro Atlantic. Such a good defender and a 6'6" do-it-all guy over there in the Metro Atlantic for St. Peter's. And with Wichita State, it's not going to be a lot of flash, unlike what we saw under Paul Mills when he was over at Oral Roberts a few seasons ago. But I just see a team that has great depth and is going to be really a tough team to be able to plan for all throughout the season.
I don't know if it's going to be a big jump, but it will be a jump from Wichita State this season. They went 15-19. They only had 5 wins in American Conference play last season. Paul Mills is a fantastic coach. I mean, you just alluded to his success at Oral Roberts. I mean, they were one of the best mid-major teams in the country 2-3 years in a row. And they won 4 of their final 6 games. They also returned 5 of their top 7 scorers. Quincy Ballard could end up being one of the top centers in the American Conference. He led the American in field goal percentage and blocks. You mentioned Harlan Beverly, also Bijan Cortez are returning senior starters, plus Xavier Bell, double-figure scorer, who was primarily the 6th man last season. Obviously, they lost Colby Rogers to Memphis, but you bring in a couple transfer additions. Justin Hill from Georgia, like his game, understands how to play at a high level in the SEC. He was 3rd in the SEC in assist rate, 9 points a game, 3 assists a game as well. You mentioned Corey Washington, some from St. Peter's. First team, all Metro, 15 a game, 6 rebounds a game. Perfect Paul Mills fit. Also like A.J. McGinnis as well, 13 points a game, shot almost 40% from 3 at Lipscomb. Paul Mills likes those shooters. We all know that. He was 7th in the Atlantic Sun in three-point field goal percentage. The Shockers only shot 33% from 3 last season. I don't think it's going to be that low this season. I expect that to change. And kind of don't forget about they got a very talented freshman coming in, homegrown kid, TJ Williams. He was the Kansas Gatorade Player of the Year. Even though they lose Colby Rogers, returning 5 of your top 7 scorers in this day and age in college basketball, it's a big deal. Wichita State's going to make a jump. They'll be better than 15-19. They're going to push for that 18-19 win season this year. I think Shockers fans will be happy with the progress. I don't know if it'll be this monumental jump, but it will be a jump.
I'm right there with you. I think with Wichita State, again, they don't have a guy like a Max Asmus. They don't have a guy like a Kevin O'Banner, like Paul Mills had when he was over at Oral Roberts. But this team I feel like they've got much more depth than they did a season ago. And that is going to be so critical for them. And what else I think is going to be so critical is a guy by the name of Baba Miller comes into Florida Atlantic. This is going to be a new look team. No longer do you have Justin May. No longer do you have that great backcourt from a few seasons ago. Though Trey Carroll is one of those holdovers from the previous Florida Atlantic regime, but I love the fact that they bring in Ken Evans. Guy was able to tear it up over at Jackson State last year. Kai Tandy began his career at Xavier, top flight scorer over at Jacksonville State. These guys are going to be taking a little bit of a jump, and I think that would be far-fetched to think that Florida Atlantic is going to have no drop-off from what happened the last 2 years, but John Jacobs is a guy that knows what the heck he is doing. He's familiar with the program, and I think the Florida Atlantic got it right with the hire, and I think that they've done the best with a difficult situation with losing a guy like Dusty May, along with quite a bit of that backcourt.
I agree with everything that you said. John Jacobs worked under Mark Few at Gonzaga and obviously Coach Drew at Baylor. He was known as one of the top assistant coaches in the country. I thought it was a very smart hire by Florida Atlantic. Lost a lot of talent, right? John L. Davis goes to Arkansas. Elijah Martin goes to Florida. Nick Boyd to San Diego State. Vlad Golden to Michigan and others. But they have positional size and strength. They got guys between 6'5" and 7 foot, and a handful of guys who can shoot at least 40% from 3. I don't think there's going to be this, Florida Atlantic's going to go back to being a 15-win team. This is going to be a really good team. There's a lot of talent on paper. Leland Walker, 6'1" junior, transfer from Eastern Kentucky, was first team All-Atlantic Sun, averaged 15 a game, 4 assists a game, solid guard. You mentioned Baba Miller. I mean, he's got pro-level skill. I thought that was a huge get. One of the most underrated transfer portal additions in the nation for Florida Atlantic, getting Baba Miller. And he came into Florida State with a ton of hype, never really found his rhythm. He went through the NBA Combine this past summer. I think he's going to be awesome in the American Conference. Caleb Glenn, 6'6" wing from Louisville, former top 100 recruit, never really quite found his rhythm necessarily at Louisville. I mean, but they like his slashing mentality. You mentioned Ken Evans. That kid's good, man. He's a grad transfer guard from Jackson State, over 18 a game. He was the SWAC player of the year. made over 63s a game. And Kai Tandy, another guy to kind of keep your eye on, Jacksonville State, started all 32 games for them last season, made almost 3 threes a game. And there's depth and there's size, and they want to average 90 points a game. And they're going to look for easy twos, playing fast in transition or attacking the rim, and then they're going to look for threes. They're going to play the analytics game a lot. I still think Florida Atlantic, they're going to compete for a top 4 finish in the American Conference. I'll be surprised if they finish out of the top 4 this season.
With Florida Atlantic, this team, even though they do lose quite a bit, you mentioned it with Miller coming in, I think that they've done a great job of being able to replace Dusty May as best as you can, because you're not going to be able to fully replace him. But at the same time, I think that they made a lot of great moves in the offseason. And this team didn't need to make a lot of moves in the offseason because UAB returns a ton. And I know that a lot of people are going to pick Memphis to be able to win the conference, but I say don't sleep on Andy Kennedy and UAB. Yaxel Lenborg is a double-double machine. Alejandro Vasquez, he is a guy that's able to go out there, get buckets, and it just felt like with every passing game last season, the Blazers just picked up more and more momentum. They also do bring in one guy in the transfer portal that I really like in Greg Gordon, top scorer over at Iona. I see no reason whatsoever why this team doesn't just compete with Memphis in the American, but perhaps might be able to take them down.
They're my pick, a preseason pick to win the American. They went 23-12 last season, finished 4th in conference play, and they won the American Conference tournament. That's how they got it into the NCAA tournament. And this just got to give a little love to head coach Andy Kennedy. Last 4 years, 23 wins, 29 wins, 27 wins, 22 wins. And UAB is going to win 23, 24, 25 games again this season because they have one of the best players in college basketball, period. Yaxel Lenborg could have an All-American type season. And he's kind of like the Nas Reed of college basketball. First team All-American Conference, set the single season school record for double-doubles and rebounds. And he was also American Conference Defensive Player of the Year. You mentioned Alejandro Vasquez, another JUCO guy, just like Lenborg, shot over 39% from 3. You know, he'll just naturally get better and be better in his second year in the system. Buddy Johnson returns, 11 points a game. He dropped 21 points on South Florida in the American Conference tournaments. And, I mean, they expect him to make another jump. He could be an all-conference player this season. And they had 6 new players. Obviously, Coach Kennedy had a lot of success grabbing Lenborg and Vasquez out of JUCO ranks, and he went back. And they got JUCO star Jabari McGee, 18 a game at South Plains College. He'll come in and have significant playing time. Mentioned Greg Gordon, double-double machine from Iona. Tyron Moore, too, is another guy to pay attention to. I think he fits the system for Coach Kennedy really well. 17 points a game at Georgia Southern, 5'11" guard, all Sun Belt. Second team this past season. Just UAB is more than capable of winning the outright American Conference title. Back-to-back NCAA tournaments for UAB that's on the books for the Blazers this season. They are my pick to win it. And that group that came back, the influx of talent that came in, it's a winning culture at UAB, and Andy Kennedy's got that thing rolling right now.
He absolutely does have that thing rolling. I love the breakdown of UAB because I'm very bullish on them as well. But the one thing that Andy Kennedy doesn't have is things rolling quite as good as you do, Mike. You do such a great job taking a look at this wonderful game of college basketball. We see you all throughout the year on ESPN, CBS Sports. You do a lot of American. You do a lot of great mid-major work as well. And I know you've done over the years some great video breakdowns over on your Twitter/X feed as well at MOD, the number 4, and then the word 3 altogether. So we'll give you the floor here. Let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how they're able to follow all of your work.
Well, I appreciate that, Greg. Twitter is kind of X now is where you can find me the most, MOD for 3. And I'll be posting content, throughout the season and game breakdowns, but I'll be doing games for CBS Sports Network and ESPN this season. And can't wait, Greg. When you shoot me that text ready to go for the season, like to preview the American, I know we're so close, man. Great jump start to the season right here.
Absolutely. It is a tradition, unlike any other, getting Mike aboard to be able to break down the American because he is the American man. He does a great job being able to break down this conference. You just heard it. He is so in tune with college basketball, and every single time he joins me, lends such great insight. So big thanks to Mike for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming in next, it is that time of the podcast to give you my projector or finish for the American. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Mike O'Donnell. He does such a tremendous job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. I always make sure I get him on every single year for this American Conference preview because he is the best when it comes to being able to break down this conference. Like you just heard it, every single one of those teams, he had so many notes on them. He does such a great job looking at this wonderful game of college basketball over there as a color analyst during the season for ESPN along CBS Sports, and it's always a pleasure to get him aboard. So a big thanks to Mike for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast to give you my projector or finish for the American, and do note that because I am doing a conference preview today, any news and notes we saw in college basketball on Tuesday, I will be polishing them up on the podcast tomorrow, so do not fear there. Anything that might have been a little bit lost in the wayside, we will be cleaning that up, but we always have to give the proper sparkle and shine when it comes to each of these individual teams and each of these individual conferences, and we're doing that today as we start out with dead last in my projector or finish being Rice. We give our ode to Lane Kiffin, go Owls, and for Rob Lanier, I thought that this was a tremendous hire, and I do think that he's going to be able to get Rice on the correct track. I just think that the conference is brutally difficult. They do bring back Alan Husinovich. He was able to shoot about 40% from three with 8 points per contest, but you're looking at Trey Borneau, who is solid out there in the Big South this season. 14 points, 3.5 assists, a steal per contest. Trey Patterson is someone that began his career over at Villanova, a former top 100 recruit, but just could never really get out there on the floor. And then you're looking at someone like an Emery Lanier, that is Rob Lanier's son. He was able to do an okay job giving the team 4 points per game, but you're going to need to have guys that have never really been necessarily go-to scorers at a high level, like Borneau was one that was at USC Upstate last season. That step up in competition, I think, is going to be absolutely massive, and typically with Rob Lanier teams, we saw this when he was at SMU. Year number one for him at SMU, it was relatively awful. Year number two is where they were really able to take off. I think that that is going to be the case here with a Rice team that, let's call it is, they have lost at least 16 games in 6 out of their last 7 years, and they are in a little bit of a rebuild right now. So I do have a Rice, number 13, in terms of my projector or finish. At number 12, I'm going to be going Tulane. With Tulane, just a case where you lose each out of your top 6 scorers from last season. You don't bring back really anyone that averaged more than 4 points per game. Greg Glenn was able to give you about 3.5 points, 2.5 rebounds per game. And I do like the upside of Rowan Brumba, a former top 150 recruit, shot 37% from three, was able to dole it out over at Georgetown last season. But as we recall, with Georgetown, they were one of the lesser power conference teams in all of college basketball last season. Kyle Green, I thought, was a nice get in the freshman, I guess you call it, recruitment trail, as he's a top 200 recruit according to 247 Sports. He should be able to help out in that backcourt right away and be able to help Brumba be able to facilitate the offense. Caleb Banks, he was playing for Indiana last season, but he was only averaging about 2.5 points per game, and this team was 359th in the country in percentage of shots that resulted in an offensive rebound. They really don't have a lot of size. This year you got Michael Elay, who was able to give you about 13.5 points, 5.5 boards over at Siena, but he had massive injury concerns as well, and having to look to Asher Woods, who couldn't get out there on the floor last season. His real only production came at VMI, a relatively rough team out there in the SoCon. I am not feeling bullish about this Tulane team, so I've got them number 12 in terms of my projector finish. At number 11, I'm going with East Carolina. East Carolina's been able to build something under Michael Schwartz, but you do lose 2 out of your top 3 scorers from a season ago. Ezra Usar being out along with Brandon Johnson. That hurts. I love RJ Felton. He might be one of the best players in this conference. 17.5 points, 6 boards, 2 steals per game. And Cam Hayes, can he reach that full potential? I felt like we were wanting a little bit more out of him last season. He averaged about 7.5 points per contest, spent some time at LSU. I think that he was with NC State as well. I might be thinking of a different age, but he's a guy that's sort of been there, done that. And then you also have Julian Sawarmo, who's been able to do a relatively solid job wherever he's been last year at Gardner-Webb, 12.5 points. Steal per contest, shot 36% from three-point range. And Jordan Riley coming in from Temple, that should be able to help, but this team was 284th in opponent 2-point shooting percentage last season, 340th and home 3-point shooting percentage as well. And I don't feel like they brought enough shooting to really be able to address that. But I do like Jayshawn Woodyard. JUCORecruiting.com rated him as the number 14 junior college transfer in all of college basketball for the class of 2024. Average at the lower level, 15.5 points, 10.5 boards, 7 assists, 2 steals per contest over at Indian River College. So that should be able to help out. But I do think that for East Carolina, they just sort of get lost with all these great teams in the conference. So as a result, I did put them number 11 in terms of my projector or finish. And number 10, I'm going to be going with Charlotte. Charlotte is a team that does a nice job being able to lock down on defense, but losing someone like an Igor Milicic, who had such good versatility, losing a guy in Jackson Threadwell, these are guys that I think are going to be very badly missed. Robert Braswell is in his 500th year of college basketball. It's actually his 7th, but I think guys been there, done that. 6'8" guy that's able to hit some threes, but he doesn't really give you any rebounding. And that's where I think that this team is going to be lacking. Kylan Blackman coming over from Coastal Carolina, he was able to shoot nearly 36% from 3, 11.5 points, a little bit over a steal per contest. That's rock solid. Jeremiah Oden, he was a starter in the Big East last season. Problem is he was a starter at DePaul, and DePaul was absolutely terrible. 7.5 points, 3 boards, and he was a solid player while he was over at Wyoming as well. And Nika Metchavili, hopefully I got that one correctly. Just the way that our good friend Mike O'Donnell said it, it was absolutely tremendous. But our man Nika from Louisiana Monroe, 12.5 points, 6 boards, 2 assists, steal per game. He was able to be a nice leader for Louisiana Monroe, but again, a team that really didn't get it done. They're going to be looking a lot to Nick Graves, 3 assists, 10.5 points, steal per game. I have my question marks on the 3-point shooting, though. They do bring in Jashawn Thomas, who JUCORecruiting.com had as the number 65 junior college transfer in this class, 16 points, 4 assists, a steal per game. He did shoot 40% from 3. If you could get anything out of Giancarlo Rosado, who was pretty much the main reserve over at Florida Atlantic last season, and Alex Motrich, who began his career over at Florida, you're looking at something, but have a lot of question marks with Charlotte and all that they've lost in the offseason. So I did put them at number 10 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 9, I'm going with Tulsa. With Tulsa, they do lose their 20-plus point per game scorer in PJ Haggerty, but I do like the system that Eric Conca runs. It feels like they were really able to just build up some momentum last year. This despite the fact that they were shooting 28.1% from three-point range. That was 348th in the country. I think that DeJuan Odom coming over from Georgia State is big. Just a nice stat sheet suffer. He's got some relatively solid size. 12 points, 5 boards, 4.5 assists per game on nearly 43% three-point shooting, though. He didn't take a lot of threes. The question is, Keston Willis, after he was limited to 2 games last season, what form of him are we going to see, as he's a career 43% three-point shooter, 13.5 points per game, but and that's a big question mark. Then you do have Isaiah Barnes. He's back after he was able to log about 8 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. And getting back Jared Garcia and his 6 rebounds, nearly a block and a half per contest. That's solid. And Braden Carrington, I like that pickup from Minnesota. Justin Amati is another guy that has question marks as well. I feel like there's a lot of upside with this team, but Amati, he missed the entirety of the 2023-24 season. Average for his career in 3 seasons at James Madison, 7.5 points, 4.5 boards, steal per contest. I think that he's a good fit with regards to this team. They were a team that did a great job on the offensive glass last season, 26th and highest percentage of shots made from free throws as well. So this is a bunch that I take a look at and I see some upside here, but they've got injury concerns and losing PJ Haggerty, that main scorer. It does have me a little bit more tepid on Tulsa. So I've got the Golden Hurricane at number 9 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 8, I'm going with Wichita State. With Wichita State, you could tell that this team just could not knock down threes to save their life last season, but I do think that returning 2 of the team's top 3 scorers in Xavier Bell along with Harnell Beverly, that's going to be able to help out. These 2 guys combined for about 22.5 points, with Beverly 5 boards, 3 assists per contest, a little bit over a steal per game for Bell, and I think both of these guys pick it up a little bit from 3-point range, but this team is really making its bones down low. Quincy Ballard, 6 boards, 7.5 points, 2.2 blocks per contest. Corey Washington was a part of a St. Peter's team that was a hard-nosed defensive team. He was able to log 16 points, 6 boards per contest. Zane Meeks is someone that pretty much was out due to injury last season during the 2022-23 season at San Francisco. Rock solid 6'9" combo player. 11 points, 5 boards, shot it well from three-point range. Bajan Cortez is a career about 38% three-point shooter, and A.J. McGinnis should be a help out with that three-point shooting as well, but I do feel like there's a little bit of question mark with regards to the ball handling. They bring in Justin Hill, who should be able to address quite a bit of that, but who's going to be that guy that really takes a shot at the end of a game? Who is going to be that guy that really steps up for this unit as well? As you can tell that it just felt like the fit overall in season number 1 under this new system, it wasn't necessarily the world's greatest. I do think that things are going to be able to get online sooner rather than later, but keep in mind, for college basketball, for the longest of times, it took about 3 years to be able to have that happen. For Paul Mills, I feel like season number 3 is where he really busts out for the American. I feel like there's going to be some small steps forward here in season number 2, though. So after Wichita State finished 10th in the conference last year, I've got them number 8 in my projector finish for this year. I am higher on this team than most. I recognize it, but we're going with it. Number 7 in terms of my projector finish. Meet me for the UTSA Roadrunners. I absolutely love what Austin Clonch was able to do while he was over at Nichols. He was a big part of Alabama being able to make that run as one of their main assistants last season, and this is just a team that I think fits together. You bring in a guy that I love in Damari Monsanto 2 years ago when he was fully healthy, putting up a double-figure amount of points, shooting 40% from three-point range for Wake Forest. Tayron Joseph, he comes in after he put up 20-plus points per game over at Southern, 1.6 steals per game. Austin Clonch runs a system where he wants guys that are going to ball hawk and they're going to generate steals. Joseph was doing that for Southern 8 seasons ago. I think that Monsanto has the ability to be able to do that. They bring in Sky Wicks from Incarnate Word. He was their top scorer. 13.5 points, 6.5 boards, 6'6", all sorts of versatility. Janavius Smith at 6'9", shot 37% from 3, a block, 8 rebounds, 8 points per game. This guy is awesome. Vanderbilt transfer. Paul Lewis, I think, has some upside. He was able to be a relatively nice reserve out there in the SEC. Marcus Millender, 9 points, 3.5 assists, shot 44% from three-point range. Clonch always ran a relatively up-tempo style. I think that that's going to be even more so this year, and he's going to zag while other teams zig, and bringing in Raekwon Horton as well. I was talking about how Clonch always loves his team to be able to generate turnovers. In his 3 years at Nichols, the team was always in the top 46 in terms of possessions per game that they, on defense, were able to generate a turnover in. Horton, while he was over at James Madison, 7 points, 4.5 boards, 1.4 steals per game off the bench. A tremendous fit for this team. I think UTSA is going to surprise a lot of people. Austin Clonch is one of the more underrated coaches in all of college basketball. I think that he gets his team fighting in the middle of the conference. I've got them number 7 in terms of my projector finish. And number 6, I'm going to be going with South Florida. For South Florida, they do lose quite a bit from a season ago, and I just don't think that they're going to be quite able to win 25 games like they did a season ago, just because the schedule was very cushy for them last season. But having someone like a Jaden Reed back who shot 47.5% from 3 with 3 assists per game, he's going to need to do it on a little bit more volume as he only averaged 6.5 points per game. But that 3-point shooting was 13th among qualifying D1 players. That's a good place to be able to start, as the team overall shot 37.5% from 3-point range on the road. That was a top 35 mark in all of college basketball. And the Bulls were also 48th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they are going to be rock solid on defense once again, in my opinion, with Kobe Knox along with Brandon Stroud back after these two guys were able to do a rock solid job. Knox a little bit more of the scorer with 8.5 points per game. Stroud only about 5 points per contest, but 6 boards, a little bit over a steal per game. Corey Walker didn't necessarily have big time production last season, but I love the fact that Mike was bringing in Jamile Reynolds. Reynolds, 5.5 rebounds, 10 points per contest, a block per game while he was over at Temple 2 seasons ago, was pretty much glued to the bench over at Cincinnati last year, but still was notching 5+ rebounds per game. Kassan Jennings, who was over at Kennesaw State last season. He was coached to begin his career by Amir Abdul-Rahim. He enters the program after he was shooting 38% from 3 2 seasons ago. He missed the entirety of the 2023-24 season. Abdul-Rahim has done a nice job bringing in a few guys from Kennesaw State that know the system. It's a big reason why this team has been so much on the same page, even though there was a coaching change. I think that South Florida stays towards the top of the conference. I've got them number 6 in terms of my projector finish. At number 5, I'm going to be going Temple. We give our ode to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. As for Temple, I do love what they brought in the transfer portal. I feel like this team was just able to find it in the back half of the season under Adam Fisher. Started off the year 8-17, and then they go 8-3 in their final 11 games with a gambling scandal along the way as well. You've got Jamal Mashburn, who can be a little bit of a chucker. He's not necessarily the world's most efficient scorer, but this guy 2 seasons ago was putting up 19 points, 2 assists on 38% three-point shooting out there in the Mountain West. You bring in Lynn Greer, who's able to do a nice job of being able to dole out the ball. He averaged 12 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, and a steal per game 2 seasons ago. I absolutely love what he's able to provide. Steve Settle is someone that's saying 6'11", that's able to pop it from 3, give you 5 boards. He's able to give you a little bit over his steal per game. Sean Bizzoni, he was able to shoot 37% from 3 with a bit of versatility as well. Michael Piccarelli shot 37% from distance last year. Temple was only about 290th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage, but with Fisher, he's a disciple of Michael Shrewsbury, who really loves to be able to take threes. He brings with him Jameel Brown, who was over at Penn State 8 seasons ago. He was averaging about 4 points off the bench, a former top 175 recruit, according to 247 Sports. Dylan Battle, he's a top 250 guy for the freshman class as well, 6'7" wing. That should be able to give you some nice versatility. I think that Temple has a good chance to be able to surprise a lot of people in this conference. I've got them top 5 in my projector finish at number 5. At number 4, I'm going with Florida Atlantic. I recognize that you lose Dusty Rhodes. You lose pretty much the entirety of that backcourt. Sans Trey Carroll, who wasn't necessarily the world's biggest contributor for them, but being able to bring in Caleb Glenn from Louisville, I think, is going to be helpful. Leland Walker was a top-flight scorer over at Eastern Kentucky, a little bit over his seal, 4 assists, 15.5 points per contest, and I think that this was just a really good hire in general to be able to bring in John Jacobs, who served as the assistant/associate head coach over at Gonzaga and Baylor for 12 years, so he knows what winning looks like. Brings in Kai Tandy, 18 points per game at a lower level for Jacksonville State on 38% three-point shooting, but he was a part of that Xavier team a few seasons ago as well. Ken Evans just is absolutely able to stuff the stat sheet. 19 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists, 1.3 steals per game. He is a matrix that shoots 39% from three-point range. And then Baba Miller, a former top 75 recruit, guy with 6'11" size. It would be a game record down low. I think that Jacobs is going to be able to get the most out of him. And I do think that Florida Atlantic, even though they were tremendous on offense last season, they were a little bit, shall we say, suspect on defense. I do think that even though the last 2 years have been unheralded success for them, they had never won really north of 21 games prior to 2 seasons ago. I think that they keep it rolling under Jacobs. I don't think that they win the conference, but I still think that they're going to be relatively competitive, and I do like this roster. I've got Florida Atlantic number 4 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 3, I'm going North Texas. North Texas is just like going to the dentist. You know that it's not going to be fun going against these guys. You bring in Jonathan Massey, who was over at Longwood a season or 2 ago, able to average about 11 points, 5 boards, 1.2 steals per contest, if I'm not mistaken, began his career at McNeese as well. But this Mean Green team, they've got a set style. Even though you saw a coaching change last offseason, this team has been in the bottom 14 in total possessions per game each of the last 5 seasons, and I think that they're going to be continuing that, with Jasper Floyd doing such a good job of filling up the stat sheet last season while he was over at Fairfield. 9.5 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, 2.5 steals per game at 6'3". He is not afraid to get his nose dirty. 10th in the country in terms of steals per game. Rondell Walker is that top returning scorer. He only averaged about 4 points, 4 boards per contest a year ago, but Mule Sissoko, he's a really good rim protector for this team. I don't think that the offense is going to be quite where it was a season ago. I know that it was being alluded to by our good friend Mike O'Donnell that this team always relies upon good three-point shooting, but they were able to address that a little bit by bringing in Latrell Jostle, a career 38.8% three-point shooter, 13 points, 2.5 assists per game last season at Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin, and I do think that this team, with them being in the top 74 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis each of the last 4 years, they're going to need to up that a little bit. They're going to need to be a top 35 defense. But with having Grant Noel come in after being a 6'9" freshman starter over at Cal, they're going to be able to do so. Atin Wright also coming in from Drake after he was able to shoot over 40% from 3. He should be able to help fill that void as well. Even though North Texas loses a lot of their top scoring from the season ago, I don't see that drop off here. I've got them number 3 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 2, I'm going with Memphis. With Memphis, they have finished outside the top 2 in the conference standings in 10 out of their 11 seasons in the American, and it just feels like with Penny Hardaway, if it's not one thing, it's another. This Memphis team should win the conference going away. There's no question about it. You bring in Tyrese Hunter, the former Big 12 Rookie of the Year. He was able to average last year 11 points, 4 assists, 1.3 steals per contest. PJ Haggerty, within the conference last year, averaged 21 points, 5.5 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals per game. Kobe Rogers is a guy that's able to shoot 40% per three. He had 16 points per game. Baraka Okoji over at George Mason was a rim protector that was absolutely awesome for them, as he was a All-A-10 freshman performer, 1.5 steals, 2.5 assists, 8 points per game. Nick Jourdain, he off the bench was able to pop it from three, give the team 6 points, 4 rebounds per game. Musa Cisse, one of the better rim protectors that you're going to find in all of college basketball. Dane Danger was a starter over at Illinois 2 seasons ago. Last year, a little bit more of a reserve, but this is an awesome roster. But Penny Hardaway, year in and year out, he just does less with more. I feel like I'm being generous with him right now because he does not deserve this sort of a benefit of the doubt. And who knows, if he gets that timeout against Florida Atlantic in the NCAA tournament 2 years ago, maybe we're talking about him a little bit differently. But if there's been one thing that has served you well, it's betting against Penny Hardaway getting the most out of his team. And I have them as a result. Number 2 in my projector are finished. Honestly, I feel generous with that. And number 1, we're going with UAB. Team has won at least 22 games in all 4 of their seasons under Andy Kennedy. As I talk about Penny Hardaway doing less with more, Andy Kennedy is the opposite. He is a grinder. He always gets the most out of his team, and he looks in, shall we say, some strange spots to be able to find some of these guys. He went to the junior college route once again for Jabari McGee. Comes in from South Plains College. 18.5 points, 3.5 boards, 4 assists, a steal per contest. This team was 24th in percentage of missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound last season, and the big reason why, Yaxel Lendeborg. He was able to average a double-double last year. 14 points, 10.5 boards, 2 blocks per contest. Another junior college product, along with another guy, don't call his name, Alejandro Vasquez, who's going to be back for the team once again. Ephraim Johnson, he shot 36% from 3 last season. He's back, 11 points per game, and his team does seem to be a little bit better on defense. They were well outside the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But Bradley Irazairo, he comes over from St. Louis, and he was able to do a really nice job for them with about 12 points, 6 boards. He's able to give them some size at right around about 6'7", 6'8", began his career at Georgetown. And Tyron Moore, he's going to give you more. 17 points, 3 assists, shot 40% from three-point range with Greg Gordon coming over from Iona. This team has much more three-point shooting than they did a season ago. They still have Lendeborg to be able to lock things down low. This team is going to be a very tough customer. They're going to be playing, in my opinion, probably a little bit more up-tempo, more like we saw in the Jelly Walker days, but now they've got even more rebounding than they did back at that time as well. I think the UAB wins the conference. I've got them number 1 in terms of my projector or finish, and that wrap things up for the American Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Mike O'Donnell of CBS Sports, along with ESPN, does great color commentary work for both. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at @GN_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. We've got 5 conference previews left, and then we are going to be set for the upcoming season. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.